The Hunter by L.J. Smith. Jenny glanced back over her shoulder. They were still behind her, on the other side of the street, but definitely following. They matched their pace to hers. When she slowed to pretend to look in a store window, they slowed too. There were two of them, one dressed in a black t-shirt and leather vest with a black bandana on his head, the other in a long flannel shirt, black and blue plaid, unbuttoned, also unwashed. They both looked like trouble. The game store was a few blocks ahead. Jenny quickened her pace a little. This wasn't the best neighborhood in town, and she'd come here specifically because she didn't want any of her friends to see her. She hadn't realized, though, that Eastman Avenue had gotten quite so rough. After the last riots, the police had cleared things up, but many of the vandalized stores still had boarded windows, which gave Jenny a creeping feeling between her shoulder blades. They were like bandaged eyes turned towards her. Not at all the place to be at dusk, but it wasn't dusk yet, Jenny told herself fiercely. If only those two guys would turn off onto another street. Her heart was beating unpleasantly hard. Maybe they had turned. She slowed again, her feet in their lace-up canvas tree-tones making no sound on the dirty sidewalk. From behind and to the left she heard the flat smack of running shoes and the clack of boot heels. The footsteps slowed. They were still there. Don't look back, she told herself. Think. You have to cross over at Joshua Street to get to the store, but that means crossing left to their side of the street. Bad idea, Jenny. While you're crossing, they can catch up to you. All right, then. She'd turn off before that. She'd go right on this next street up here. What was it? Montevideo. She'd go right on Montevideo, and then she'd find a store to duck into, a place to hide until the two guys had passed by. The Tower Records on the corner of Eastman and Montevideo was no longer in business. Too bad. Back straight, stubbornly pretending she was perfectly calm, Jenny walked by the darkened windows. She caught a glimpse of herself in one of them, a slender girl with hair that Michael once said was the color of honey in sunlight. Her eyebrows were straight, like two decisive brushstrokes, and her forest green eyes were dark as pine needles, and even more serious than usual. She looked worried. She turned right at the cross street. As soon as she was out of sight of Eastman Avenue, she stopped and stood still as a deer, backpack swinging from her hand, eyes desperately scanning Montevideo for cover. Directly opposite her was a vacant lot, and beside that a Thai restaurant closed. Behind her, the looming bulk of the record store presented a blank wall to the street all the way down to the park. No cover. Nowhere to hide. Jenny's neck prickled, and her little fingers began to tingle. She turned toward Eastman and hugged the wall, tossing back her hair to listen. Were those footsteps, or just the sick thudding of her own heart? She wished that Tom were with her. But of course that was the whole point. Tom couldn't be with her, since it was his party she was shopping for. It was supposed to have been a pool party. Jenny Thornton was known for her pool parties, and here in Southern California late April was a perfectly reasonable time to have one. The temperature often hovered in the mid-70s at night, and the Thornton pool glowed like a huge blue-green jewel in the backyard, giving off little wisps of steam from its surface, the perfect setting for an outdoor barbecue. Then 3 days ago the cold snap had come, and Jenny's plans were ruined. Nobody except polar bears swam in this kind of weather. She'd meant to rethink things, to come up with some other brilliant idea, but it had been one of those weeks. Summer's 14-year-old schnauzer had finally been put to sleep, and Summer had needed Jenny for moral support. Dee had taken a kung fu exam, and Jenny had gone to cheer her on. Audrey and Michael had had a fight, and Zach had had the flu. And then suddenly it had been Friday afternoon, with just hours to go before the party, and everyone expecting something special, and nothing set up. Fortunately, an idea had come to her in the middle of computer applications class. A game. People gave murder mystery parties and Pictionary parties and things like that. Why not a game tonight? It would have to be a very special game, of course. Something chic enough for Audrey, sexy enough for Tom, and even scary if possible to keep Dee's interest. Something 7 people could play at once. Vague notions had run through Jenny's head of the only really exciting games she'd ever played as a child. Not the ones the adults arranged, but the kind you devised on your own once they were safely out of the house. Truth or Dare, Spin the Bottle. Some combination of those two. Only more sophisticated, of course, more suited to juniors in high school, would be ideal. That was what had brought her to Eastman Avenue. She'd known perfectly well it wasn't the best neighborhood, but she'd figured that at least none of her friends would see her and find out about this last-minute scramble for entertainment. Jenny had gotten herself into this mess. She would get herself out of it. Only now the mess was getting bigger than she'd bargained for. She could definitely hear footsteps now. They sounded very close and were approaching quickly. Jenny looked down Montevideo again, her mind taking in irrelevant details with obsessive precision. The record store wall was not truly blank after all. There was a mural on it, a mural of a street that looked much like Eastman Avenue before the riots. Strange. Parts of the mural looked real, like that storefront painted in the middle, the one with the sign Jenny couldn't quite make out. It had a door that looked real. The handle seemed 3-dimensional. In fact, startled, Jenny took a step toward it. The knob appeared to change shape as she moved, like any 3-dimensional object. She looked more closely and found she could see the difference in texture between the wooden door and the painted concrete wall. The door was real. It couldn't be, but it was. There was a door stuck in the middle of the mural. Why, Jenny didn't know. There wasn't time to wonder about it. Jenny needed to get off the street, and if this door was unlocked... Impulsively, she took hold of the knob. It was cool as china, and it turned in her hand. The door swung inward. Jenny could see a dimly lit room. One instant of hesitation, then she stepped inside. Just as she did, she consciously took in the sign above the door. It read, "More games."